Hey y'all. Um, I don't really know what I want to talk about today. Today was kind of a weird day, I guess, emotionally. I've just been struggling all day. Um, I want to give you guys a little bit of background, I guess, as we get to know each other a little better. I'll probably tell you all much more about my story and my testimony, but I don't know y'all like that just yet. So, we don't know each other that well. So let's just take it easy, baby steps. But just to give you some sort of background, I grew up with a really religious praying grandmother. For those of you, if you know, you know, right? You know the power of a praying grandmother. If you were lucky enough, if you were one of the chosen ones, you know what I mean, to have one of those. And I was so blessed. I had the best grandmother in the entire world. May she rest in peace with our Heavenly Father. She was just the greatest woman the greatest spirit that I'd ever been around in my entire life. And if I could embody just like an ounce of what she carried every day and the things that she did, I would be honored. But my grandmother, she raised me. She moved into our home like from birth. She moved in. I'm the seventh child out of eight. So by the time my mom was having me, she really needed a lot of help. And so she called her mom. Like, I'm gonna need you to come here, come here and help me. And my grandma moved in with us. And at the time I was born anyway, doesn't matter. I don't want to give too many details about my personal life, but she moved in with us. And so I had my grandmother from birth. And my grandma, when she passed away, I was 28. So, and it was still the hardest thing in my entire life. It was the hardest thing in my entire life. I think that was just a revelation because I now realize that I'd been through, I'm going through a season right now, sort of a stormy season. But I'm now realizing, like, wait a minute, this is not actually the worst thing I've ever been through. The worst thing I've ever been through was losing my grandmother, and I survived that. So yeah, actually, that just turned around the whole day. Y'all, it's 6:30 p.m. 6:30 p.m. my time where I'm at, and that just turned around my entire day. That realization. But anyway, back to what I was saying. It was the hardest thing losing my grandmother because she was like the she was everything. She was everything. The sun rose and set with her, and her name was Rose. But she was the one getting all of us, ready for school in the morning, especially the girls. My mom has a lot of daughters, and getting the girls ready, doing our hair. She made sure we were fed. She made sure our clothes were clean. She just did everything. She cooked. She cooked every day. She remembered everyone's eating preferences. Who doesn't like onions? Who doesn't eat stewed tomatoes? Who doesn't, take this off this person's plate? She was just this most incredible, amazing woman. But I think I learned so much from her. All the little, even to this day, my grandma's been gone now for about 12 years, going on 13 years now. And there's still daily something that I do or say or remember that's due to her, that she taught me, that everything, the way I clean, the way I cook, everything, the way that, I care for people. My grandmother had this huge heart, and I just, she was just wonderful. And we know that nobody's perfect. The only perfect being is God. But man, she came close. You know what I'm saying? And I realized how lucky I was or am to have had her for 28 years. And I always say, like, oh, she was gone too soon, which she was. And if I could have her for another 100, I would. But she was here in the time she needed to be here, and she did what she needed to do because she left behind a legacy, now that I'm thinking about it. So my grandmother is the one who introduced us to religion, to God. My grandmother started taking us to church. I think I used to see this woman. She was my favorite person, and I see her leave the house every Sunday and go somewhere and come back. And eventually, I don't know, I think I might have been 6 or 7. And I asked her one day, where is it that she's going? And she said she's going to church. And my family's Caribbean. We're from the Caribbean, so there's different layers to this. My siblings and I were all born stateside, but our elders were from the Caribbean, so there are just a lot of layers to this. And religion and church is just really, if you know, you know. If you're Black American, if you're Caribbean, if you're, like what religion means to us. If you're African, Nigerian, like so it's like um my grandma, I asked her where she was going every Sunday, and she said, oh, my child, I'm going to church. And I said, I want to come. I remember just telling her, I want to go with you. And that was it. From that point on, it was just every Sunday church with my grandma, Sunday school, Bible studies, Friday nights, just, it was just, it became our lives. It became my life. I used to sing in the church all the time, and it was just, I was, I realized that I was good at it. I felt in my zone, in my element, in my space. And my grandmother was just so proud, just always so proud to see me, praising God, and she would spend hours praying, just spend hours in her room on her knees praying. And I would just be in there with her, and I didn't realize it then, but I was learning a lot. I was learning a lot about prayer, the power of prayer, the way that things can change if you really believe. What faith can move mountains, right? What is it? Faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains, right? And I don't know what book of the Bible that comes from exactly, but I do know that is a quote from the Bible, and it's amazing to think about. So I'm sorry, I'm getting back. Let me go back a little bit. So my grandmother introduced us to religion. She taught me how to pray. She taught me she just had this amazing, just wonderful love for God, but not even just a love for him. Like she had a great relationship with God. Like my grandmother put him first, and she put him first in everything, And I think about it now. I mean, it's unfortunate because my grandmother's gone now, and there's so many things that I can't ask her. And while she was here, I never thought to ask her these things. But it's maybe that's part of the lesson, the lesson that I've been learning. So we grew up in religion, and I was like 13 years old when I got saved. I remember there was a rough patch going on for my family. There was a lot going on. We were homeless. My mom, my mother, my grandmother, and 8 children. Yes. And some of the older children already started having kids, because my older siblings started having kids as teenagers. There was a lot going on in our family, a lot of upheaval, a lot of turmoil, and it was just so much going on. And I was kind of rebelling and doing things that I shouldn't be doing, and, not really listening to my mom. And I remember one day I came home, it was a Friday night, and they were having like a revival. They were having revival at our house. So church revival, if you've not grown up in church, if you've never been around church, revival is usually it's one of those things, it'll be like a week-long thing, celebration. But if you don't have a space, you can do it at a church space if you have a space or whatever. But if you don't, some revivals are like traveling revivals, and they go around to congregation members' houses. So, if you hosted revival, yesterday or last week, then I would host this week. And, you have refreshments for people, but it's like the entire church in your little apartment, But at the time we were in a shelter, but we weren't like in a group shelter, like congregate shelter, because my mom had so many kids and we were all teenagers at this point. There are a lot of rules surrounding shelters and having little kids mixed with big kids. So they had to give my mom essentially an apartment because she had several teenagers. My sisters and I were all teenagers at the same time. And so they had to give my mother an apartment by herself, like an apartment, so it was decent. It was for her, my mother, my grandmother, and, those of us that weren't adults. There were a few adults already. A few of the older siblings had already become adults, but so it was decent and it was okay. But I remember coming home late one Friday night. Of course, I'm like 12 or 13 years old, so late means you didn't come home after school, essentially, especially in a Caribbean family. Like after school time is your curfew. What do you mean curfew? There's no curfew. When the school bell rings, you bring your butt home, right? So I came home at this point. I was probably out running the streets. It was like, um, it was like not yet summertime. There was still school. School wasn't out yet, but it was probably like late May, like, it was late spring, late spring, early summer. So it was like 7:30, at night, which is not late, but for your 12 or 13-year-old kid who doesn't have a job or whatever, like, what do you do? Where are you? School got out 5 hours ago, and also I walk in the front door, and of course the entire church congregation is in our living room because revival is being hosted at our house that night, of course, in our tiny little shelter apartment. And I was, kind of embarrassed because I walked in late, obviously, and now all the church people, right? You know how it goes. The church members, the congregation, now they're, looking at my mom like, is this how you, handle your home? Is this, the children run your home here? Like, essentially like kind of judging her. And she was embarrassed. I could see it in her face. She was embarrassed. And I hadn't done that. I didn't mean to embarrass her. I didn't know those people. I completely forgot, or I wasn't thinking about it. I was just coming home. And I was preparing myself for the trouble, for the beating I was going to get. Like, oh, she's going to, I'm going to get my tail whooped when I walked in the door. But so I guess it was kind of a silver lining. I couldn't get my tail whooped because the living room was full of people, but it was this other energy, this sort of like shame that was just hanging there. And I remember, like, okay, I had to join the revival because, like, you might be late, but you're not getting out of it, So I sidled into the living room and just stood there kind of in the corner, just taking it in. I'd been to revivals before, hundreds of them at this point. I was like 13, so I'd been to hundreds of revivals in the last 6-7 years at this point. But I don't know what it was. There was something different that day. I think a big part of it was that I knew that I had shamed my mom and grandma in front of the entire congregation. Part of it was that I was feeling a lot of shame. So long story short, I got saved that night. During the revival, just like at the end of any service, at the end of any revival, they ask if there is anyone, come to the altar. If there's anyone right now who's ready today to turn their life over to Christ, come to the altar. And my 13-year-old self, I'm standing there, but I was feeling something, and it wasn't just shame. I was also feeling, I think, weariness. I was tired of things going the way they'd been going, not just for myself, for my family. I was just tired, and I felt, I guess, drawn. I felt the pull, and I got saved that night. I was 13 years old. And I raised my hand and I said, I remember giving this speech, and I don't know where it came from, but I was crying, and I was saying how I didn't want to hurt my mom anymore because she didn't deserve that. And, all these things. I remember my mom crying and my grandma crying, and it was a really, really, really like moving moment. And that was that. I got saved at 13 years old, which, when I think about it now, I definitely wasn't ready to have made that decision. And it's not because my age. I'm sure there's probably some 13-year-olds out there who know that they want to dedicate their life to Christ, and they make that choice, and they, but I think about it now, I have children that age, and I don't see, but maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, but it's just like, could a child make that kind of decision, So following from that point on, from 13, that was it. I got saved that night. I probably went to church a little bit more after that, but actually my relationship with Christ did not grow from there. It didn't blossom, but this is not blame either. What I'm saying is, I didn't do anything from that point. And the reason being, I understand now, is once it happened, once I said, I raised my hand and said, I'll come up to the altar and I want to be saved. And the pastor, he laid his hand on my head, and all the elders and the deacons, everyone surrounded me. It was a huge thing, and it was so hot. And I remember I don't really remember much because it was just so much going on. But from that point on, I think in my 13-year-old logic, I think I decided, okay, that was it. Because no one tells you what comes next. Do you understand? I didn't know what came next. I thought you get saved and you're saved, and that's it. You're good. Absolved of your sins, move on. Go ahead and live your life. But I mean, the very next day or the day after that, if you're back doing all the same things you were doing before, were you really saved? You know what I'm saying? So nothing, when I say nothing changed from there, nothing changed really. I think I thought in the back of my head that, okay, now I'm saved. So I don't, my work here is done, kind of, wash my hands of it. Like, okay, I'm done. And so let's fast forward from that point on, 25 years later, right? 25 years later from that point of 13-year-old Tab, giving her life over to Christ. 25 years later, we're now more than 25 years later, but I'm just going to give you guys an idea of the last couple of years of my life, but we're past 25 years now. But 25 years later, I find myself, we're in the middle of a pandemic like everyone else, right? No direction. I'm sitting at home and I'm in a new house. We moved right at the beginning of the pandemic. So there was just a lot of change. And the relationship with the father of my children was just not, it was, I don't know, we were stuck, being people who'd been together since they were teenagers. And we'd work through a lot and we'd not work through a lot. And we found ourselves we were at a place where it was just like, oh, wow. You just kind of wake up and realize like, oh, you still here? Like, we're still doing this, because there hadn't been any work being done, right? We were just existing. We were just here. But I find myself here. I had no real direction besides, I didn't really know who I was besides being someone's, mother, or, someone's spouse, or someone's sister or daughter. That's it. I didn't know who I was and what I was supposed to be doing. And I tried doing a couple of different things. But I found, I guess, what I thought was my calling in a culinary program. I went to learn how to, I don't know, I wanted to do something, just get off the couch, right? And I thrived there. And I don't want to. I don't think I'm ready to do this. There's a lot that is happening and I'm skipping through it. There is going to be another story that will fill in everything that happened in the meantime, in between time, from the time I started the culinary program until today, which is about a little bit more than a year now. So in the last year, 14, 15 months, there's been a lot that has happened, a lot. But long story short, there was a really, you find that sometimes when you hear the term or the phrase rock bottom, I think a lot of people don't understand like what that really means or what that feels like or where you actually need to be to be embodying rock bottom, like where you actually need to be feeling what you need to be feeling. So between starting the culinary program, last August of 2023, and it's now October 30th of 2024, a lot happened, a lot of highs, a lot of, successes and highs, but there were some lows, and the lows were some really, really, really significantly impactful lows, really traumatic, some really traumatic lows. And I found myself in the last 2 months, I was in the lowest, darkest place I'd ever been in my life, and I did not want to continue. And I almost didn't. I almost did not make it. And I think the point of everything that I've been saying today, and I realize now that I did know what I wanted to talk about, was I wanted to talk about faith. I wanted to talk about Jesus Christ, right? I wanted to talk about how I was in the lowest trench that I had ever been in, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Just 2 months ago, I was scared. I was scared for myself because I didn't know if I was going to make it. But I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm sitting right here in front of you. I did make it. And I'm still, it's an everyday process. Like I am just really getting serious and like really walking with Christ. Like I'm like, you need to stop playing. You need to stop playing. And the reason why I can say this is the fact that I can sit right here in front of you. The fact that I'm alive. I'm alive. That's nothing but God. That was nothing but God that saved me, that pulled me out of it. I remember I was laying in my bed one of the many days of me just laying here, just crying and wanting to die because of the things that had happened in the last year and the things that I'd gone through, the loss and everything that had happened. I wanted to die, and I called out to him. I called out physically. I literally called out loud. I was crying out loud. I was like, God, please. Like, please help me. Please, I need you. I need something right now. I need you to take this pain away from me right now. And I remember crying and just clutching my chest. Like, it hurt so bad. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I felt this, like, just calm just wash over me. I swear, I kid you not. I felt actual chills. Something had embraced me. Something. I felt the presence. I felt it. And everything has changed from that point. And not to be like dramatic, like, oh, my whole life is perfect and everything. No. The first thing I told you guys today I'm struggling. Today I am struggling. Today was a hard day. But the difference is 3 months ago, if I had a hard day and was struggling, I would be curled up in a ball in my bed wanting to end it. Because that's how much the emotional like weight was. That's how much the trauma that I'd been carrying since I was 6, 7, 8, 9. You know what I mean? The last 30 years. I can get through things now because I'm not alone. And that's one of the things that is so important to remember. All this time, I spent all these years, decades, suffering, sometimes silently, but sometimes not. And just being alone or feeling alone. But when I tell you, like, just going back to what I know, going back to basics, I didn't know. I tried everything else, all therapy and this and that and all these things and chasing the wrong things and chasing the wrong people and trying to find love and find this and find that and doing drugs and drinking and all these things that were going to make me feel better. And going back to what made me feel better almost instantly was talking to my Father. I just had to call out to him. He was there the whole time. He'd been here the whole time. I just needed to call out to him. He was waiting for me. He was waiting for me to finally be like, I need you. I need help. And I guess that is the message today that I want to leave you with, if I can, is that no matter what you're going through, no matter what is happening, there is one constant. There is one constant. And that's God. He's always there. He's always there and he's listening. He's always there and he's listening. And he wants us to call out to him. He wants us to reach out to him. He wants us to seek him out. He wants us to know him the way that he knows us, because he knows us. He knows everything you're going through. He already knows all the problems in your heart. He already knows. You just need to talk to him and you need to listen. Talk to him and listen. That's my message for today, I guess, because that is what's been getting me through. That's what's been getting me through. Every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do is talk to him. And now every night before I go to bed, the last thing I do is talk to him. And I'm telling you, consistency is key. Just with everything else, you have to work out a muscle, right? You've got to get into a habit, I guess, and in order, you have to work the muscle in order to strengthen it, for it to become stronger. And I kept saying I wanted to have a relationship with God and I want to feel closer to him. Well, the only way to do that is to do it. That's the only way to do it, is to do it, right? Put in the work. And I find now that I'm talking to him more. It's not just when I wake up. It's not just scheduled meetings. We don't just have Zooms, It's not just once in the morning and once in the evening. It's throughout my day. He's getting me through. And I would not be able to get through without him. But this has gone on a little longer than I wanted it to. So I'm going to leave it at that. And we can talk some more tomorrow. All right. Have a good night, y'all.